At first glance, everything looked fine. I lived in my son Ethan's house, a modest two-story tucked behind a row of identical homes in a suburb of Nashville. The neighborhood was full of trimmed hedges, seasonal wreaths, and families who waved politely but never lingered. After my husband passed, quietly, in his sleep, 2 winters ago, Ethan had called. Said it would be good for the boys to have their grandmother close. Said they had space. Said I wouldn't be a burden. Melanie had smiled when I arrived. Tight-lipped, but cordial. She showed me to the guest room, the one that used to be her office, and told me to make myself at home. I did, though home was not the word I'd have chosen. I folded my sweaters neatly in the half-empty dresser, placed my toiletries on the edge of the bathroom sink, and tucked a photo of Henry on the nightstand. It felt like a borrowed life, even then. I tried to be useful. I cooked most nights. Nothing fancy, casseroles, roast chicken, sometimes the boys' favorite macaroni if I had the energy. I kept the counters clean, wiped down the windowsills, watered the plants no one remembered to water. I picked Jaden and Noah up from school, helped with homework, kept their routines in line when both parents worked late. I asked for little. A corner for my sewing machine, a shelf in the pantry, a quiet space for my morning tea. I tried not to intrude. Then one night, as we cleared the dishes, Melanie chuckled and said, mostly to herself, not meeting my eye. This place is getting tight. 3 adults and 2 kids? We might as well call it a retirement home. She laughed. Ethan said nothing. Just reached for another plate. That silence said too much. I dried my hands on a dish towel, folded it slowly, and placed it back on the handle of the oven. It was a small moment. A passing joke. But something shifted. Not in the room, in me. It began as little things. Quiet things. The sort of slights that pass through a room like a draft, barely noticed, unless you're the one feeling cold. Melanie started leaving me out of family photos. At first, it was just the holiday card. I assumed it was an oversight. She said the photographer was booked last minute, and the boys were already in matching sweaters. It was chaos, she laughed, you wouldn't have liked it. I nodded, smiled, and said I understood. Then came Jaden's birthday. I helped bake the cake, his favorite, vanilla with strawberry frosting, and even set the candles in a neat little arc across the top. But when it came time for the group picture, Melanie guided me gently out of frame. Let's just get one of the 4 of us, she said. You know, for the album. I stepped back, hands still dusted with flour. Ethan said nothing. At dinner, she complimented Ethan for the meal. It was the stew I'd spent 4 hours preparing. She praised the seasoning, the tenderness of the meat. You're getting so good at this, she told him. He shrugged and looked at me briefly, but didn't correct her. The boys didn't notice. They were busy with their tablets, heads bowed. I washed the dishes that night more slowly than usual, watching the steam curl against the cold kitchen window. Outside, the yard was dark and still. I could hear Melanie laughing in the next room, some TV show playing. My hands moved through the warm water, but my thoughts were elsewhere, drifting, unsettled. On another day, I asked if I could take a weekend to visit my sister in Murfreesboro. We hadn't seen each other in months. Melanie's eyes widened. Oh, that's when the boys have soccer, she said. And you are kind of the help around here now, aren't you? She laughed quickly, too loudly, like she wanted it to pass off as a joke. But her eyes were sharp. Ethan was in the room. He glanced at his phone. Said nothing. The word stayed with me. The help. Not family. Not mother. Help. I returned to my room early that evening. The ceiling fan clicked softly above. On the dresser sat a drawing Noah had given me, a crooked heart, my name written in pencil across the top. It said Grandma. No D. Just the way he always said it. I traced the edge of the paper with my thumb, remembering how his face had lit up when I'd clapped for him at the school talent show. Ethan had been late that night. Melanie hadn't come. but I was there. Still, none of it seemed to matter. I noticed how Melanie started redoing little things I had already done. She'd rearrange the living room after I cleaned it. Rewash the boys' clothes because she liked the smell of their detergent better. She once told me I folded their shirts the wrong way. "It's not a big deal," she said, "just, maybe leave that to me." I began to feel like a shadow in my own routine. Moving through the house in quiet loops, morning coffee, laundry, school pickup, dinner prep. A loop with no voice. Sometimes Melanie would talk about future renovations. "We could tear down that wall," she'd say, gesturing vaguely toward my room. "Open up the space. Maybe build a proper home office. Or a playroom." Ethan nodded absently, sipping his beer. They never asked how I felt. They never asked if I was comfortable, or lonely, or tired. They just expected. My presence was assumed. My labor absorbed. Even the boys began to mimic the tone. Jaden once asked if I was babysitting for free again. Noah corrected him. "She lives here." Jaden shrugged. "Yeah, but she's not the boss." That night, I took out my old photo album. It smelled like cedar and thyme. I flipped through the pages slowly, Henry with his tools in the garage, Ethan on his first bike, my hands holding the seat as he wobbled into the street. There we were at the beach, one summer long ago. I was wearing a wide straw hat, squinting into the sun. Ethan was smiling at the camera. He used to smile like that all the time. I closed the album. The house was quiet. Not peaceful. Just quiet in that way things get when no one wants to say what they're thinking. The next morning, I found my sewing machine unplugged, pushed to the back of the closet. Melanie had replaced the little table where it sat with a set of houseplants. She didn't mention it. Neither did I. It was raining the day I overheard them. Soft, steady rain that brushed against the windows and roof with the gentleness of someone knocking to be let in. I had just come back from walking Noah home from his half-day preschool. His boots were damp, so I left them on the mat to dry. I handed him a small cup of cocoa and told him to sit tight while I put some laundry on. He nodded, still clutching the plastic dinosaur he carried everywhere. I moved toward the hallway, arms full of small clothes and towels. As I passed the kitchen, I heard Melanie's voice. She must not have known I was back yet. "She's a financial drain," she said flatly, as if stating the weather. "You know she won't be around much longer. Then maybe we can use her room as a home office." I stopped in my tracks. There was a clink of silverware on ceramic. Ethan's voice came next, quiet. "She has nowhere else to go," he said. "Let's just hang in until we can afford daycare." "Hang in?" Melanie snapped. "She lives here like she's our responsibility. She doesn't pay rent, doesn't contribute to the mortgage. She cooks, Mel." Melanie exhaled audibly. "So do microwaves." Ethan didn't respond right away. I heard his chair creak. "She's your mother, Ethan. But she's not my mother. And I'm tired of pretending she's not a burden." The word landed hard. Not for the first time, but this time it wasn't meant for me to hear. I felt something in my chest shift, like a picture frame falling inside a closed drawer. Quiet, but unignorable. I backed away slowly, careful not to let the floor creak, and stepped into the laundry room. The washing machine hummed like it always did. I stared at the open lid, the detergent cap still in my hand. A few minutes later, Melanie passed the door. She didn't notice me right away. Then she did. She stopped in the doorway, her arms folded. "You do realize you're kind of a burden, right?" she said. Not a question. Not a whisper. Not even cruel, exactly, just matter of fact. I looked up. Met her eyes. My hand tightened around the detergent bottle. Then I smiled. "Good to know where I stand." She blinked. Maybe she expected denial. Maybe a tear. But I gave her nothing. I poured the detergent into the washer, closed the lid, and pressed start. That evening, I made pasta, Noah's favorite, with butter and cheese. I toasted bread, set the table, poured drinks. I made sure the boys' napkins were folded just the way they liked, with the little corners tucked in. Ethan came home late. Melanie had already served the boys. I placed a plate down for him like I always did. He said thanks without looking up. I watched the four of them eat while I sat with my hands in my lap. No one asked if I wanted any. After dinner, I cleared the dishes in silence. Melanie laughed at something on her phone. Ethan asked Jaden about his math test. I moved through the kitchen like steam, present, but not acknowledged. I packed leftovers into small containers and labeled them with black marker. Melanie would probably complain I used too many plastic lids again. I washed each dish carefully. My hands were red and wrinkled from the hot water. That night, in my room, I opened my bottom drawer and took out a cloth bag with a zipper on top. Inside were small bundles of savings I had been collecting quietly, birthday cards from Henry, untouched pension checks, a few crumpled 20s folded inside a scarf. I laid them out on the bed one by one. Not to count. Just to remember that they were mine. My whole life, I had given without keeping score. I had shown up, cleaned up, made space, and made peace. But tonight, I didn't feel noble. I felt used. I felt foolish. And still, more than that, I felt tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from chores or age, but from being slowly erased. From being tolerated instead of loved. From watching the people you raised slowly turn into strangers with familiar faces. I folded the money back into the bag, zipped it, and placed it at the bottom of my suitcase. Then I turned off the light and lay in the dark. The rain had stopped. The house was quiet again. But the quiet felt different now. It didn't soothe me. It warned me. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't try to fix what had already been spoken into clarity. The morning after that conversation in the kitchen, I made the beds, folded the boys' laundry, and laid out their school clothes as usual. I pressed the shirts smooth with my palms, though I didn't know why anymore. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was the last thread of dignity I had left to pull taut. I moved differently that day. Slower. More careful. Every gesture deliberate. I began packing my things in silence, one drawer at a time. Not rushing. Just choosing what would come with me. The spare slippers. The small blue teacup I kept on the windowsill. The necklace Ethan had given me for my 60th. I wrapped it in tissue and slid it into a side pocket. When Melanie left for work and the boys were still at school, I stood in the doorway of my room and stared at the wall where my calendar used to hang. It was blank now. I had stopped marking the days a while back. I remember thinking at the time that it didn't matter anymore, my schedule was theirs. My time belonged to someone else. I took the calendar down, folded it once, then again, and tucked it into the trash. That night, after the boys had brushed their teeth, I lingered in the hallway. Their bedroom door was slightly ajar. I heard them whispering about some video game, giggling softly, the way children do when they think the grown-ups aren't listening. Noah was asking if I could come to his school art show next week. Jaden said of course I would. He said, "Grandma always comes." I sat down on the edge of the couch, their words curling in my ears like steam. Always comes. Always there. Always available. I thought about the way Melanie had said, kind of a burden, and how Ethan hadn't flinched. I started looking for places the next day. Not shelters. Not senior living. Just something small. Quiet. My friend Yvonne in Wilmington had a cottage, 2 bedrooms, small garden, walking distance to a school. She had mentioned it last year when her brother moved out. Said it was too quiet for her now. I had smiled at the time. I wasn't ready to hear the offer for what it was. Now I was. I called her that Thursday morning. The boys were at school, Ethan at work, Melanie upstairs on a call. I stepped into the garage with my phone, holding it like something fragile. Yvonne answered on the third ring. Her voice was still soft, slow, southern as cornbread. Yvonne, I said. It's me. I think I'd like to take you up on that cottage. There was a pause. Then, you come whenever you need, honey. I told her it would be me and the boys. She didn't ask questions. Didn't ask why. Just said the second bedroom had twin beds and that the backyard still had Henry's old bench, the one he'd made on that trip back when all of us still had time. I started gathering the boys' clothes that night. One drawer at a time. Their raincoats, their shoes, their backpacks. I did it quietly, methodically. I didn't want to alarm anyone. I wanted it to feel seamless. Like a breath held, then released. Noah had drawn a picture of our house the other day. He'd colored me in beside the front porch, watering the flowers. The sun had a face and wore sunglasses. I folded the picture carefully and put it in the side pocket of my suitcase. I would hang it in the new kitchen. Each night, I added more. Their favorite pajamas. The nightlight from the outlet. The library books we still hadn't returned. I left their toothbrushes for last. I didn't want to tip my hand too early. Melanie never noticed. Ethan didn't ask. They were busy. That was the word Ethan always used. Busy. The night before we left, I stayed up late baking blueberry muffins. Jaden liked them warm with butter. Noah didn't like the blueberries, only the cake. I made 2 versions and labeled them. I placed them in plastic containers and slid them into my travel bag. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked around the room one last time. It wasn't mine. It never had been. Not really. The closet door still had Melanie's label maker tape stuck near the top. Supplies. I picked it off. Slid it into the wastebasket. That night, I didn't sleep. At 4:30 a.m., I slipped into the hallway, gathered the boys' bags, and woke them gently. They stirred, groggy but trusting. I told them we were going on a little trip. They didn't ask questions. Jaden took my hand without a word. Noah carried his toy dinosaur. We left through the garage. I clicked the door shut behind me. The porch light never turned on. The driveway was wet from early dew. My car, a silver sedan that Melanie once called ancient, was packed and ready. I'd filled the tank the day before. The boys climbed into the back seat and buckled themselves without being told. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. There were no tears. Just absence. We arrived in Wilmington just past noon. The boys slept most of the drive, heads tilted toward opposite windows, their small bodies still warm from sleep. The roads were clear, just long ribbons of gray stretching through silence. I drove with both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale, my eyes scanning every exit like it might ask me to explain myself. But I owed no one an explanation. Yvonne's cottage sat at the end of a short gravel path, half hidden by hedges and flanked by azaleas that hadn't yet bloomed. The porch sagged a little in the middle, and the paint on the shutters was beginning to peel, but it was sturdy. Quiet. Ours. She met us at the door with a pot of something warm and a towel slung over her shoulder. Her eyes softened when she saw the boys, then flicked to me. "You look tired," she said gently. I nodded. "I'll make up the beds," she added, stepping back. We settled in slowly. The boys picked their rooms. Noah wanted the one with the window facing the magnolia tree. Jaden liked the smaller one, said it felt like a fort. I unpacked their clothes into low drawers and stacked their shoes by the door. I hung their coats on wooden pegs, mine beside them. That evening, I sat by the kitchen window with a cup of tea, watching the boys chase each other barefoot across the yard. Noah shrieked, Jaden hooped, and somewhere in that sound was something I hadn't heard in a long time: freedom. Not chaos. Not permission. Just ease. The next morning, I called the school. The principal's assistant had a kind voice. She listened as I explained our situation, said she'd forward the call to administration. I sent over documents, medical records, report cards, birth certificates. Nothing fancy. Just proof. Then I filed a petition with the local family court. Temporary guardianship. Just until things could be sorted. I submitted notarized affidavits from neighbors back in Nashville, Mrs. Elgin next door, who always saw me walking the boys to school. Mr. Creighton, who once helped me patch a tire and who told the court in writing that I was the only adult who ever showed up to the parent-teacher meetings. The boys' teacher sent short notes too, unprompted. She picks them up every day, rain or shine. I've never seen either parent at a conference, only her. At the courthouse, they called my name softly. I stood, hands clasped tight, and walked to the bench. The judge was kind. Not warm, but not harsh. She asked questions. I answered plainly. Do you have a permanent residence now? Yes. Do the children have a stable daily routine? They eat, they sleep, they play. They smile. She nodded. A week later, the court approved my petition. They said it was temporary, but they also said it could be reviewed if circumstances didn't change. And no one, not Ethan, not Melanie, had contested it. Because no one knew. I didn't leave a note. I didn't call. I didn't send pictures or ultimatums. I simply removed myself from a story where I was no longer welcome. And what no one knew was this: I wasn't poor. I had never been. Henry left me everything. After the mortgage was paid and the funeral arranged, there was still just shy of $2 million in accounts that bore only my name. I had lived quietly. Frugally. Out of instinct, not necessity. My checks for groceries were always on time. I bought second-hand sweaters, shopped off-brand cereal. Melanie once laughed when I patched my old shoes with glue. She won't spend a dime, she had said once at a barbecue, not knowing I was behind her. It was never about the money. It was about not being a weight. But now? Now the money had purpose. I bought a small 3-bedroom home on the edge of town, just 10 minutes from the school, 15 from the ocean. It had pale yellow siding and a swing on the porch. The boys helped me paint the fence one Saturday, dipping their brushes too deep and flinging white across the grass. I didn't mind. I hired a lawyer, quiet, precise, discreet. We drafted a will. We updated my accounts. We locked every piece of it behind names they would never guess, institutions they would never think to check. Melanie once told me I'd die in a recliner with a coupon book in my lap. Instead, I stood on my porch every evening, tea in hand, watching my grandsons play with sun on their faces and dirt on their shoes. We were not rich. We were not grand. But we were free. And every night, when I locked the door and turned off the porch light, I felt something I hadn't in years. Safe. The first call came on a Tuesday. I was slicing apples for Noah's lunch, the house quiet except for the distant hum of the washing machine. The screen lit up with Ethan's name, no photo, just the plain font that now felt foreign. I stared at it until it stopped ringing. It came again, 5 minutes later. This time, I answered. You kidnapped our kids. No greeting. No hesitation. Just those 4 words, sharp and flat, as though said through clenched teeth. I didn't speak right away. They're my sons, he continued. You had no right to take them across state lines. Do you have any idea what you've done? They are safe, I said quietly. And happy. He exhaled through his nose, like he wanted to scream but didn't know how. Melanie's freaking out. She says you ruined everything. I didn't ask what everything meant. I had a guess. Daycare deposits. Work promotions. The scaffolding of convenience that had rested, all this time, on my back. That evening, Melanie sent an email. The subject line read, "You betrayed us." I read it once. Then again. Not because it was hard to understand, but because the tone was so deliberate, so polished in its cruelty. She wrote. We welcomed you into our home. We fed you. We let you stay rent-free. And this is how you repay us? By stealing our children and running off? Do you know what you've done to Ethan? To me? You've broken this family. We trusted you. We needed you. And now you've destroyed what little peace we had. Not once did she ask how the boys were. Not once did she ask if they were eating well, or sleeping enough, or smiling. The next morning, I forwarded the message to my attorney. She flagged it, along with Ethan's voicemail, as part of the ongoing documentation. Within days, Melanie sent another email. This one softer. Curdled with apology. I was emotional, she wrote. This is just all very confusing. Let's talk. Let's figure this out together. Maybe we could meet halfway, let the boys come home, and you could visit more often. Like normal grandparents do. I didn't reply. Because nothing about this was normal. They had fed on my labor, my patience, my grief, and when I stopped giving, they called it betrayal. That weekend, a letter arrived by certified mail. It was formal. Legal. From a Nashville firm I didn't recognize. Ethan and Melanie were seeking full reinstatement of parental custody and demanding an immediate return of the boys. The letter accused me of undue influence, relocation without consent, and emotional manipulation. I sat at the kitchen table and unfolded the paper slowly. Noah's painting hung behind me, bright blue water, a yellow sun with a crooked smile. Jaden's new fish tank bubbled softly in the corner. I laid the letter beside my tea and picked up the phone. My lawyer answered on the first ring. We were expecting this, she said. We're ready. She reminded me of the court's previous ruling, the teacher statements, the medical logs, and the neighbors' affidavits. You've built something solid, she said. Let them bluster. And bluster they did. Ethan called again 3 days later, this time his voice trembling. I didn't know it had gotten that bad, he said. I didn't mean for it to go this far. She's not herself. And work's been hard. I said nothing. I need to see them. They're not hiding, I said. You're their father. But being a father and acting like one aren't the same. The line went quiet. When I hung up, I turned off the ringer. The next day, Melanie sent flowers. White lilies in a glass vase with a note, let's talk this through. I left them on the porch until the petals browned. Then I threw them out with the recycling. They kept calling, messaging, circling the edges of the situation like people locked out of their own story. But this was no longer their story to control. This was a chapter one had claimed, sentence by sentence, with quiet resolve. They didn't understand. They thought I had taken something that belonged to them. But I hadn't stolen anything. I had simply walked away, with what was already mine. They came in a black SUV with Tennessee plates and unfamiliar silence. 2 months had passed since I left. The cottage had settled around us like an old coat, soft, worn in the right places. Jaden's shoes lived by the front door. Noah's drawings curled on the fridge. My calendar once again had marks, parent meeting, library story hour, Jaden's swim test. I saw them pull in from the kitchen window, Ethan in the driver's seat, Melanie beside him, a man in a navy suit in the back. Lawyer. I didn't need to guess. He stepped out first, carrying a black folder under his arm like a weapon dressed in paper. They didn't come to the front door right away. They stood near the hood of the car, talking. Melanie's arms moved too much. Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets. The lawyer adjusted his tie. I didn't move to greet them. I didn't pour tea. I didn't set a chair. When they knocked, I opened the door halfway. Mom, Ethan said. His voice was tight. Tired. Can we come in? I looked at the man behind him. He raised a hand, cautious. We're here to talk. Nothing more. Melanie held out a bouquet, roses, too red, too fragrant. For the table, she said. I thought it might brighten. I didn't take them. Let's not pretend, I said softly. Ethan cleared his throat. We've been thinking. About everything. Melanie and we overreacted. Things got said that shouldn't have been said. But we want to make this right. Right for whom? For the boys, he said quickly. We miss them. Melanie took a step forward. You can come back. We can forgive. I let the silence do the answering for a moment. Then I opened the door wider, not to let them in, but to hand them something. A single envelope. Cream-colored. Sealed. Melanie took it. What's this? My updated will, I said. Everything I own is going to a foundation for abandoned grandmothers and single parents. She blinked. But, what about? And if you contest this, I added, my voice even, you lose visitation rights. Forever. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. The lawyer stepped back slightly, perhaps sensing the air had shifted beyond law. You don't get to rewrite the story, I said. You called me a burden. Now I've lifted that burden. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Melanie tucked the envelope under her arm, turned without a word, and walked back to the car. Ethan hesitated, looked at me, not pleading, not angry, just hollow. I didn't mean to let it happen, he said. I know, I said. That was the problem. He nodded once. Then followed her. The engine hummed to life. Tires whispered over gravel. I stood on the porch long after they'd gone, the wind lifting the hem of my sweater, the sun angling low behind the trees. I didn't wave. I didn't weep. I simply turned the porch light off. Then went back inside, where the boys were waiting to set the table. Our new home didn't have much, no granite countertops, no walk-in closets, no media room with surround sound, but it had something the last house never did. Room to breathe. Jaden took up fishing. There was a small pond 2 streets over, just past a white fence where the paint had started to peel. He'd go there with a sandwich and a bucket, and most days he came back with stories, not fish. That was fine by him. He liked the waiting, he said. The quiet. Noah started painting. Watercolors at first, then pastels. He used the dining table, and I let him, laid out old towels, clipped newspaper to the edge of the chairs. He painted birds, mostly. Trees that looked like dreams. One afternoon, I asked why there were never any people in his pictures. He looked up and said, because I like when it's just me. And I understood that more than I could say. We didn't talk much about the past. Children are better at forgetting. Better at moving forward. I watched them shed the tension of that old house without even knowing they'd been carrying it. No more whispering behind closed doors. No more quick glances to their parents before speaking. They laughed openly now, at the dinner table, in the yard, in their sleep. I started writing again. Not stories for adults, those felt too heavy, but small tales, the kind I used to make up when Ethan was little. Talking animals, hidden forests, little boys with wings who couldn't fly straight. I wrote in a notebook with a blue pen. When the boys weren't looking, I read the stories aloud to myself, testing the rhythm of each line. Yvonne came by every Thursday. She brought soup, or cornbread, or nothing at all. Just herself and her slow, knowing voice. She never asked what happened back in Nashville. She didn't need to. Sometimes she brought yarn. I taught her to knit again, the way we used to when our kids were toddlers and the nights stretched long. You're softer now, she said once. But not smaller. I smiled. I knew what she meant. Our days settled into a quiet rhythm. Breakfast at 7 o'clock. School drop-off at 8 o'clock. Groceries on Tuesdays. Library on Fridays. Sunday afternoon walks along the coast. We didn't need much more than that. There were no slammed doors. No forgotten birthdays. No jokes that left bruises. I let the porch light stay off. The house held us gently. Not like guests. Not like tenants. But like it was built just wide enough for the three of us to fit without bumping into resentment. I bought a second-hand bike for Jaden. He taught Noah to ride using a row of orange cones and the side of the garage. I watched from the window, a tea towel in my hands, heart aching in a way that felt oddly like healing. At night, the boys helped with dinner. Noah mashed the potatoes, Jaden set the table. Sometimes they fought. Sometimes they sulked. But even their sulking was safe here, unsharpened, unobserved. I taught them to cook slowly. The way Henry taught me. No rush, I'd say. Let the butter tell you when it's ready. Jaden laughed at that. But he listened. I planted basil in a ceramic pot on the kitchen sill. Bought a bird feeder and hung it outside Noah's window. He tracked the visitors in a little notebook, gave them names, Ruby, Franklin, Marbles. One night, I found Jaden reading one of my stories to Noah. He didn't know I was there. I watched from the hallway, my hand resting on the doorframe. The story wasn't finished yet. He was making up the ending as he went along. It was better than mine. Later, as I folded laundry, I realized what I had been doing all these years, shrinking. I had made myself small to stay in the room. Polite to stay in the photo. Useful to stay in the house. But here, in this little yellow home, I no longer needed to be less of myself. Here, my presence wasn't conditional. It was wanted. One morning, I found a note on my pillow in Jaden's handwriting. Thanks for bringing us here. I like this version of us better. I didn't cry. I folded it into the back of my notebook and pressed it flat. That night, the three of us sat on the porch with bowls of ice cream. No television. No distractions. Just the low hush of crickets and the slow rhythm of spoons tapping glass. I looked at the boys and thought. This is what love looks like when no one's keeping score. It was nearly 6 months later when the past came knocking, not with rage this time, but with something slower, wearier. Ethan called. I let it ring twice before answering, standing at the sink with water running gently over my hands. His voice was low, unfamiliar in tone. Hi, Mom. I said nothing. Not yet. I'm not calling to fight, he said. Things aren't good. Still, I said nothing. Melanie left, he continued, quieter now. She packed up in February. Took the car, most of the savings. Said she needed something she wasn't getting. I don't know where she is now. I haven't seen the boys since Christmas. My breath caught, only slightly. I'm not asking for money, he added quickly. I'm not asking for anything, really. I'd like to see them. Not overnight. Not even for the weekend. Just maybe, read to them. Be there. There was no blame in his voice. Just something cracked open and hollow. I could almost hear him shifting on the other end of the line, waiting for a verdict. I looked out the window. The boys were tossing a ball in the yard. Jaden shouted, Noah laughed. Their shapes blurred behind the screen, soft and moving like shadows in sunlight. You can visit, I said. But this isn't a return. He exhaled audibly. I imagined him nodding. You'll come humbly, I added, or not at all. He didn't argue. Just whispered, thank you. When he arrived 2 days later, he didn't come in a suit or bring gifts. He came alone, in an old windbreaker, holding a book Jaden used to love, Where the Red Fern Grows. I watched from the porch as he stepped out of the car and stood awkwardly by the fence. The boys paused, then ran to him. There was no hesitation. Just instinct, born not from memory but from possibility. He sat with them in the grass, reading slowly. His voice was careful, unsure at first, then steady. Noah leaned against his side. Jaden corrected him when he skipped a line. I stayed in the doorway, one hand resting on the frame. I didn't join them. This visit wasn't about mending what had been broken. It wasn't about apologies or rewriting the past. It was about letting him remember, maybe for the first time, what love looks like when it isn't earned through convenience. When they finished the chapter, Ethan looked up and met my eyes across the yard. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just nodded. That night, Jaden asked if Dad could come again. I said yes. But he won't stay. Not here. Not like before. He will come humbly, or not at all. And I will open the door, not for him, but for the children who still love what they don't yet understand. The porch is quiet now. Noah's rain boots rest under the bench, still caked with yesterday's adventure. Jaden's fishing rod leans against the wall, a bit of string trailing like a forgotten thought. Inside, the kitchen smells faintly of toast. The kettle ticks as it cools. Ethan still visits. Once every other Sunday. He never stays long. He arrives with worn paperbacks, sometimes groceries, never expectations. He parks his car a full house down, as if distance might soften memory. He doesn't ask to come inside unless invited. The boys have grown into this new life like wildflowers, unplanned, resilient. Noah paints long into the evening now, often barefoot on the kitchen floor, humming to himself. Jaden reads aloud without being asked, always choosing the longest story, always leaving the light on after. And me? I keep a notebook by the armchair, filled with beginnings. Not endings. Children's tales about unlikely heroes, turtles, clouds, lost socks with dreams. I write them quietly. Never to publish. Just to remember who I used to be before silence became a skill. Sometimes I sit on the back steps and listen to the wind, wondering if it carries pieces of my voice I gave away over the years, soft things I never said, harder ones I swallowed whole. Melanie hasn't called again. Ethan never mentions her name. Last week, Noah asked why we don't have many pictures of the old house. I told him we left it behind like a coat that didn't fit anymore. Too tight in the shoulders, too thin at the sleeves. He nodded, then painted a picture of a new house under a wide sky. The front porch had 3 chairs. One was empty. I don't know what that means, not fully. But I keep it on the fridge. One day, the boys may ask for the full story. They may want names, details, versions. I'll give them none. They deserve their own truths, not inherited bitterness, not borrowed blame. I won't teach them how to erase people. Only how to refuse being erased. My attorney called yesterday. She said the foundation paperwork is complete. The assets are secured, the provisions in place. The envelope I gave Ethan has never been contested. I asked if she needed anything else from me. She said no. Everything was settled. After we hung up, I folded laundry. Not because it was pressing, just because the rhythm calmed me. One shirt, then another. A towel, then a sock. I matched each pair carefully. That's what life feels like now. Not thrilling. Not triumphant. Just, matched again. The boys will leave one day. They'll grow up, find their own corners of the world. They may forget the color of this cottage. The weight of the screen door. The way I always cut apples in quarters, not slices. But maybe, just maybe, they'll remember this. That for a time, we built a life where no one was invisible. Where the silence didn't sting. Where love wasn't conditional. And when that silence finally closes around me, as it will someday, I won't fear it. Because it was never the quiet that broke me. It was the story others tried to write in my name. And I didn't disappear. I just stopped playing by their script.